Welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, depending on where you're joining us from. We have people here from APAC, from Africa, the EU, South, Central, and North America. Welcome all. Thank you for joining us for the third session of our 2024 Fundamentals of Sponsorship series. Today's focus will be on sponsorship strategy. We have a lot to get through. We're going to try moving quickly without speaking quickly. And as you take notes, don't worry if you miss anything or something. We'll be sharing today's presentation with all attendees within the next 24 hours. And as an aside, apologies that our last share was a bit delayed, but we will get this out within 24 hours. So look for that in your email box. We do have a Q&A box open, but we have a lot of content to get through. Our intention is to spend about 10 minutes on Q&A at the end, but please add any questions in there as we go. There's a chat box also, so feel free to pop in there, introduce yourself, and with that said, let's get started. Hi, Ryan.
Ian, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Good to see you. Please introduce my colleague, Ryan Dunnigan, who will be co-presenting with me today. Between us, we have about 50 years of experience, Ryan. So I'll reuse the joke I used in session one with Rebecca. That makes this in our very late 20s. Good to see you. We're both in our Toronto office, different sides of the building, similar backgrounds on the bricks. So good to see you, Ryan. So in terms of agenda for today's session, we'll give a little short clip on us, just in case you aren't aware of who we are and what we do, and in case you didn't attend the last two sessions. We'll talk about our view and our perspective on sponsorship strategy. We'll help identify the framework that is essential for building sponsorship strategy, and then we'll talk about some of the practical, usable actions that you can take to further your journey, your brand's journey along the way. This session is designed for brand side marketers and brand side marketing procurement people only. So there are no properties on the call and no other agencies. We do content that's open to all, but this is intended for brand side only people. So thanks for joining us today. Just a quick little bit about us. We work across 21 different country markets, and we support global organizations as well. We do have reps in. Over the last 10 years, we've evaluated more than 3,000 different sponsorships from sports, arts, culture, cause, community, investment, athletes, entertainers, as well as cross-promotional partnerships. While we are specialized and expert in brand side sponsorship consulting, we intentionally don't work on the property side of the fence. We believe we can bring the best value to our clients by remaining on with unbiased advice on the brand side of the equation. So we are full service, but we are limited to sponsorship. So we help clients with sponsorship strategy. We're going to talk about today, property evaluation and valuation, which have a bit of a nuanced difference to those two terms, sponsorship operations or governance, measurement of impact, and all the things that come in between. We also have a set of software tools that help brand owners to be more efficient and more effective in their sponsorship, including our AI-driven sponsorship proposal management tool called Touchstone. That has about 18 years on it, when we've just fully rebuilt for a fourth generation of Touchstone that launched in August. I mentioned earlier, this is session 3 of the 3-part series. Session 1 was up September 11th. We talked about sponsorship operations or governance. Session 2 was a week ago today. That was on data around sponsorship, measurement, evaluation, and so on. And today's focus is on sponsorship. So we'll talk again about aligning business objectives, synergy with existing practices, and developing some KPIs. If you weren't able to attend one or two of the first two, please reach out to us. Our email is at the back of the deck, and just make the ask, and we'll send you a video recording and the deck for both of those. Over to you, Ryan.
Great, thanks, Ian. Hi, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, early evening. Thanks again for joining us. As Ian mentioned, Rebecca, Joywyn, and Ian had already taken you through operations and data from a sponsorship perspective. This third leg of this would be, as Ian said, focused around strategy. And our hope is today, there's actually some familiar terminology in addition to introducing you some new information. one of the themes you're going to find today is lifting the veil, if you will, on the idea of the sponsorship strategy or development of a strategy itself being a scary, clouded, shrouded in mystery thing. So we want to demystify that a little bit. So the hope is today you take what we're able to share with you with some new news and some new information and ladder it into or add it into some of the things you're already doing with your respective brands. Slide. Thank you. First one is, as we said, is demystifying the topic, and certainly there's an amount of information you're going to need as a brand owner to alter, change, or augment your brand strategy at any point in time in your business. But we think that that's no longer the case where it's only for certain individuals to do at a certain time of year. This is something that should be evolving on an ongoing basis and rooted in data. And if you've known anything about Lunacy, data is very, very important to us. So when it comes to demystifying the topic of strategy, we always think that dig yourself into the facts and look at the business model that works best for your brand. The second thing is from a process perspective, we certainly understand that every organization has a different way of building a model that goes from idea to execution. And we want to inform your model rather than asking everyone on the call to change to what we're doing, is take what we're doing and implement it into what your practices are. From a practical perspective, the level of adoption is going to go way up when you introduce processes and systems that are familiar to you, the people you work with in your organization. And the last one is probably the most scary, but for me, the most fun is encouraging action. We certainly appreciate that change isn't easy. And if you are new to a role or in a highly established organization where they've always done certain things a certain way, we're certainly not advocating any type of adversarial change within your group, but taking the risk or smart risk with data and information to make a change that's good for your business can be really exciting. So as Ian said, some practical ideas around encouraging action when you see the need to. So once we define the why in terms of sponsorship and sponsorship strategy, you can hear us talking a little bit about sponsorship being an ongoing thing. And a lot of times it says, where are we now? Where are we going? How will we get there? And how will we measure success? And as Ian alluded to, Joyman and Ian did take you through a measurement before, or it was last week, but we really see this as something that's ongoing and living. Where we see brands making, dare I say, a mistake would be they sign the agreement, they attend the event, the kickoff event, and then they just leave it. We really see that as an opportunity to look at sponsorship as an evolving piece, because your business strategy will change to match the needs of your audience. And certainly we see the need for you to always evaluating where you're going and how you're going to get there. So this is a fun exercise. So I'm sure at this point in time, we've all had the chance to Google the word strategy, and what you get is very, very different. So you're often going to see a meme. You're often going to see a highly shared quote from someone who existed many, many years ago. You're going to see something about hope is not a strategy. We bring this up because ultimately it comes down to, is your business model, is your strategy for sponsorship relevant to your business now? And is it relevant to the times you're in? Here's one specific example. Sorry, and one way to look at it is, gone are the days maybe we do decade-long agreements. Maybe you do short-term agreements because the pace you're working at changes significantly with your consumer, your target audience. So it could be an example of developing the right strategy, may not be necessarily creative, but an executional way to bring that to life. Sorry, Ian. So then why is it necessary? If you go to the next one really quickly. If you've been to an event, you've been to a show, a game, wherever it may be, there is a chance you've seen a brand that gives you this space. And why they're giving you this look and this space is the brand itself may not be adding value to the fan experience or audience experience, and instead they're being a distraction. And this isn't to say you need to be cookie cutter in your approach to brand strategy and where you end up executing. But at the end of the day, you need to be relevant to the audience and enhancing that overall experience. So what we don't want to do is we don't have brands invest time, effort, and energy from a commercial side to activate a sponsorship only for their brands and their fans to say, well, what is this brand doing to enhance and make my experience better? And there's typically three scenarios we've seen brands face in this world of sponsorship strategy. Number one is you're not in sponsorship or you're new. And while there's lots of questions here, there's certainly a lot of excitement because you have nothing but green pastures ahead of you to look at your portfolio differently, understand where you want to go, and answer a lot of questions on the way. So there's a lot of white space in section 1. Section 2 is you're in sponsorship and you might be in a lot of properties, but you don't necessarily have your clear strategy. So you're, from a fan perspective and an audience perspective, they see your brand a lot of places, but it's inconsistent in terms of how it comes to life. And the last one is you have an existing strategy, but it needs to change. And this one's interesting because it may be at a large brand, a large organization, and this will require a shift in thinking or a shift in terms of how you're looking at information to make that right decision.
What we often see is that brand owners don't know how to get to the start of the strategy point. It seems, as you said earlier, it seems veiled, it seems scary. And so the precursor to the building the strategy is the ability to build a roadmap to get to the strategy. What things do you need to do internally to gain alignment? Who do you need to speak to? What resources might you need? And once that, not all that complicated effort or task of getting a roadmap in place enables you to get alignment across the organization to say, we can get there, we can build that strategy, and here's how we will get to that from a process and a plan perspective.
Thank you. So without being able to poll the audience, we don't know exactly how many NASCAR or cycling fans we have, but when we think of developing a smart sponsorship strategy, we see it like a Peloton, either with 2 wheels or 4, but thinking about developing a strategy that aligns and drafts closely to your overall business and commercial strategy. The reason why we say this, there's a lot of practical reasons to do this, and there might be some people in the call saying, well, of course we should do that. But this is often difficult or more difficult to do because, especially in the world of sponsorship, when you're connecting to consumer passion points, there might be some bias involved that necessarily takes you away from your commercial objectives and your measurable KPIs. So when you set down this path, either to crawl, walk, or run down the road of sponsorship strategy and development of that, do whatever you can within your organization to make sure you're as aligned to the commercial strategy as possible, because when you get to not only the ideation phase, but certainly implementation, things will become much easier for you because you already have a large audience aligned to the direction you're headed.
Brian, you mentioned that notion of crawl, walk, run, then sprint. If you lack a strategy now, or the one you have is antiquated and out of date, you don't need to get fully bright in the next 6 months. But part of that roadmap plan we talked about before is enabling you to say, in the next year, we want to accomplish this. In 2 and 3 years, because of the nature of sponsorship with often long-term investments from a rights perspective, it's important to take the organization and your colleagues on that journey with you without the expectation set that we're going to be perfect right out of the gate, and give ourselves license to crawl, then run, then walk.
Ian talked a little bit about going fast without speaking, but I'm a naturally impatient person. So when we think about the steps to bring this to life, the first one for me is understand, and that requires a lot of diligence and patience. And for me, this is a challenging one because I know this is a really important step in the process, but I often want to get to the create phase. So when you take the time to understand the key elements about your brand and your business, that will go a long way, especially when you're trying to change perceptions and behaviors within an organization. So depending on your role and where sponsorship sits in terms of a maturity element with your organization, don't rush through this understand phase. That's a critically important one. We'll take you through that a bit more in a bit. The second one is create. It's going to get a little messy, especially when you're introducing new ideas, new thoughts, and processes in terms of bringing sponsorship to life. Take the time to get uncomfortable. You often heard that phrase get used in the business world. I'll talk a little bit about that. And the last one is implement. And when we circle back to that last slide around sponsorship strategy being aligned to commercial, implementation becomes much easier when you're using systems and processes in at least terminology and language that existing partners and existing internal stakeholders are used to. Because again, we know change isn't easy. So if you're looking at new properties and new partners, if it's done in a familiar way, it seems like a subtle step change, although it could make a very dramatic improvement from a results perspective. Ian?
Thank you. I'll get the next slide going eventually. Important to be data-driven and insight-led when building a sponsorship strategy and when you're managing your sponsorship activity more broadly. Many times we're in a place where we need to get this done by a certain date. And within that time, do we do the work to find the facts rather than rush to a conclusion? Make sure that time spent in the muck of the data and understanding your target audience and understanding where your brand can fit from a sponsor perspective is allowed. Ryan, you also mentioned enjoy the mess, or at least get comfortable in the mess. But let's face it, sponsorship on its merit is messy. Even a smallest size sponsorship portfolio will include properties across geographies with different contract term dates, maybe supporting different brands or business units within your organization with different objectives, different stakeholders. Add to that, there are a few initiatives across the organization that will involve as many different internal stakeholders, be it brand, sales, trade marketing, marketing procurement, legal, HR, public affairs, investor relations. All that brings with it a lot of complexity, but a clear and articulate sponsorship strategy will help bring clarity to that mess.
Thanks, Ken. We see, and you've probably seen it too, in terms of how your brand or brands you're fans of coming to life in different ways. Sponsorship is a way for brands to activate their brand in a different way, especially from a values perspective and how they demonstrate how they feel about their business to an audience in a new way. So we really suggest leaning into USPs, unique selling propositions, because at the end of the day, you've seen in that very first slide that we showed, there was probably 30 plus sponsors at that outfield wall. And at some point in time, everyone said, we're unique because of X. And we believe in association with that, I believe it was the New York Yankees, is the right thing for our business, but so did 30 other brands. And if you were at that game, is your ability to break through simply by a outfield wall what you need it to be from a activation and measurement perspective. So again, really lean into your USPs, your unique selling propositions, to figure out what is it about my brand that's going to really stand out. And then you might have to go backwards in time and say, what information impacted previous decisions about sponsorship? So were we at a different scale? Was there a market challenge? Was there new leadership? Whatever it may be. And why is the landscape different today? And you're going to hear this message a few times today too, which is focus on clear and simple. Sponsorship can be messy, as Ian pointed out, and it likely is in a lot of cases, especially with highly desirable properties. And so the more clear and succinct your message is, the better from a breakthrough perspective. And when you look at the right side in terms of understanding your audience and your market, again, look at the gaps that exist in terms of your marketing touch points and your commercial activation points that where sponsorship could fill. Odds are, or there have been cases where we might suggest to a client, it's not about doing this sponsorship, it's about doing a sponsorship that might be different than the one they're suggesting, because from an objective perspective, it doesn't actually match their goals. And so it's that fine line between finding something the audience, both internally and externally, is passionate about, and also a property that it does what it needs to do from an investment perspective and improving your P&L. Go to the next one. This is an example where we've taken out obviously some client and property information, but when we think about being focused and simple in messaging, this is a relatively recent example in the last 24 months where we had a brand activating a very large sports property. And they were new to the space, very excited. And what they wanted to do was convey a number of messages to this new audience because it was a highly desirable target market. We performed some research and measurement at the back end of the sponsorship to figure out what was most effective within their activation. And lo and behold, what you saw was more cluttered messaging, let's say, or the number of messages went up, effectiveness went down. And I know this is really tough to do because there's a lot of investment in times in sponsorship and partnerships, and everyone, well, let's make sure we tell the audience everything about us. But that could actually work against you. And this isn't to say every channel you have needs to have the same messages, but we certainly think being thoughtful and again, relevant and adding to the fan experience with simple messaging is the right way to go. You've taken the time to understand where your brand is and where it is in its life cycle, where you want to go. We're into the fun phase, the messy phase. If you were an artist or a painter, this is the time where you could make a bit of noise as far as thinking of your portfolio differently. And don't be shy to get uncomfortable. And the reason why you're trying to change or start something is because there's a current gap in your business right now. And so change or creating something new is required. And so we really encourage everyone to, with data as your foundation, think of different ways of looking at your sponsorship. From a framework or creation perspective, we look at a framework and leveraging what you have. Number one, we look at measurement models, which Joy and Ian talked about last week. There is a lot of presenting and aligning. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And the last one, again, most is developing a platform where your brand could speak to your audience. So there's 4 major components that come into building this sponsorship strategy. The first is where we need to grow and go. You'll often hear different companies have phrasing like white space. Where do we need to go? What's the market we need to get to that we're not reaching now? Again, using terminology and frameworks and even documentation that your company's familiar with is going to help you a lot here. The good news is if you're, again, drafting closely to your commercial strategy, identifying a white space should be fairly easy, because at the end of the day, there's a broader commercial objective and business objective you're trying to solve. So where you need to grow and go and branching out should be identified by your commercial needs. The second thing is not always the easiest, which is where changes are needed. And again, depending on the legacy and time you have within sponsorship, this could be internal in terms of what does marketing need to do differently, what does operations, execution need to do differently, and external. What is this going to do for our brand health? How is this going to generate leads? What is it going to do for sales? We certainly know, and our experience tells us that sales functions and sales teams heavily leverage sponsorship with customers. And so if there's a change in how your brand executes maybe large sports sponsorships and that impacts sales lead potential or customer relationships, that's something that certainly need to get discussed. And the last one will be investment. Certainly these days, there's the need for transparency and the need for ROI calculation in terms of if we invest $1, what are we going to get back? That's a conversation that every brand's having these days, and we appreciate that. We look at it as how can you use existing dollars to your advantage in terms of what are expiring dates of agreements you have, and when will those dollars be free? What are those new property opportunities? And if it's an up-and-coming opportunity, could you have a pay-per-performance model that doesn't have so much financial risk for you? And the last one I'll touch on really quickly is we've had a lot of success where if your P&L has changed or the needs of your P&L change, not enough brands, I think, are able to, or at least consider going into their properties and saying, hey, we need to renegotiate our current term. Could we look at it differently? Could we extend it? Could we activate differently? You'll find a lot of properties are very open to the idea of keeping a good partner and keeping them happy by renegotiating midterm, then waiting until the end and having a start from scratch. So we look at those as 3 really important ways to build that framework.
Just double hit on that, Brian. We've had extremely good success at that. I can't think of an example where that didn't work out. It doesn't mean that we wind up spending less with that property that we go into reopen on, but we're able to trade assets in a way that helps us now meet the current strategy, because we may have assets in our portfolio and in our properties in the portfolio that don't serve the needs and the objectives that we set for the sponsorship. And often a brand owner will say, well, we can't do that. Like, we have a contract here, we have a commitment on time and investment. But if you think about the property side of the table, if you're not using assets that you can't use, or you have assets that you can't use, and you trade those back for assets you can use, that enables them to monetize those assets with another partner that need those assets. So it's a reasonably accessible conversation to have. And Ryan, to your point, is then they understand that you're more likely to come back at re-up time because you're now helping that sponsorship do what it needs to do from a brand and a commercial strategy perspective.
Yep.
So hopefully comfort there. Those conversations are easy-ish to have. You obviously need to do them tactfully, but they're easy-ish to have. So when we think about how we're measuring success, you mentioned earlier, Ryan, how will we know when we get there? It's a measurement approach. And what gets measured gets attention, and what gets measured finds organizational alignment. What doesn't get measured does not. There are still brand owners that are sitting in a place comfortably where they're not getting pressure to measure, because there's still confidence with executive team, with funders, that this felt good, and we got a sense that the customer was happy, the consumer was there and got benefit, and internally everyone felt good about it. But what we're seeing is that is a dying breed of brand owner, where the CFO doesn't walk in at some point, the CMO doesn't walk in at some point and say, we can't do this anymore. We don't rely on non-measurement in any other part of our business. We don't tolerate non-measurement in any part of our marketing pressure. And sponsorship by a spend is about 12%. This is average from some research we did last fall with the WFA, is about 12% of marketing spend. So it's number two only to media, but it still goes relatively unmeasured in many organizations. There's still about 40% of organizations that aren't measuring or don't know what they're getting from their sponsorship. The importance of the measurement model, and we talked about measurement in part 2 of this series, means you're measuring what matters for your business and for your industry category, because that's going to differ from category to category. And it provides a feedback loop to ensure your strategy and your sponsorship operation, including your activation, is delivering on the business outcomes you intend. It also enables you to demonstrate to leadership and to your internal stakeholders that the resources you're applying to sponsorship activity is being both efficient and effective. And our advice is set measurement against your business goals and objectives. So on the left side here, this is going to vary by again brand category, but what are you intending to achieve here? If you're a brand or you're in a category where awareness really drives consideration and purchase intent, then awareness measures are important. If you're in a category where that doesn't drive that funnel activity, or you're a brand that doesn't have an awareness problem, do you need to be buying awareness assets to a large degree? Be sure you're measuring purchase intent, and if it matters, what's it doing for our e-commerce, and what is it doing for consumer sentiment from a perspective? Like, are we the top 3 favorite brand of that consumer? From a tool perspective, and again, we did a whole session on this. Again, reach out to us for that video recording if you'd like to look at the playback. But it's not a simple out-of-the-box solution. It requires customization to your business. It doesn't need to be complicated. It doesn't need to be slow or expensive. We have a bit of a heretical approach to measurement here at Lumency, but it can be quick, effective, cost-effective. So the first point would be develop a property scorecard that's used for either each property in your portfolio, or at least maybe the top 80% of your spend. So you're being able to compare property performance across your portfolio. And that doesn't mean every property performs the same way, but then you can also drop down to the next level and say, well, let's compare all of our music festivals across all of our geographies, or let's compare all of our properties in the Mexico market as an example. So a few points to leverage would be sponsorship-specific research. That's a bit of a nuanced piece. We happen to do that as part of our service offering, so please reach out if you'd like to learn more about that. But it enables us to measure the activation, what activations across a particular property or across the portfolio are breaking through and which are giving us diminishing returns. So let's adjust our investment to make sure the ones that are breaking through get more funding, the ones that are not do not get the funding. Brand recall or brand health more broadly. Are we breaking through to consumers, the fans recognize that we're there? And do they see that we're there from a key messaging perspective? So I'm dropping down two bullets here. But are the messages, as Brian said earlier, the things we intend to communicate through our activation and our sponsorship, are we actually breaking through there? And then lastly, target efficiency. How efficient is that spend against reaching the right audience? And are we having spillover or wasted marketing spend because we're in a property that doesn't give us strong target efficiency? There are categories that we do work in where beverage alcohol would be one, where if you're in a property where your target audience is less than a particular percentage of legal drinking age and over, should you really be there, just as a governance catch there. And from a presentation and alignment perspective, it's really critical because we talked about sponsorship being messy. There are so many stakeholders involved if it's being effectively activated across your business and across your objectives. But building and maintaining alignment is critical, and maintaining is as critical as building. So building alignment against, we're looking at a new property, we're looking at a re-up. Do we have alignment across the stakeholder group that's involved in executing against that property that we should be going back? And the sidebar here would be, let's not invest time and resources in evaluating that property on a re-up if we don't, on a first pass, don't think it works for us, so let's not go back. But the sponsorship team, and also that can include the marketing procurement people responsible for the sponsorship function within the spend category, are often politicians. We would always encourage a formalized approach from a governance perspective that's approved and aligned to by senior leadership across the organization. But we also advocate for funding formulas. How are we consistently funding these sponsorships from a rights fee perspective and an activation perspective, so that each time we do a renewal, each time we look at a new property, each time we go into a particular portion of our portfolio, we're not having to go and do a stump speech across the organization to get alignment on a case-by-case basis. If we do that from a structured perspective, we get further ahead. And alignment also means agreement. Brian, you mentioned earlier that notion of there's a lot of passion and emotion around sponsorship. Do your colleagues get as excited about your media spend? Maybe not, but when there's something that tacks into one of their passion points, something they have a lot of heart for, there is passion. Sponsorship is successful in a large measure because it is passion-filled. That's why it connects so well with consumers and helps move the needle from your business. That also means people in your C-suite, people sitting next to you, have that same often connection to that property. So gaining that alignment that's fact-based and data-driven. We've had also very good success at moving a client to a position where it was often all visceral to a position where it's business case based, so that when you go into funding, when you go in a funder, when you go into a C-suite, they see a consistent way of approaching evaluation of that sponsorship in a way that they can align to, and that can also then, in the cold light of day, often get that passion parked a little bit to say, well, this particular property, if we're looking at a property level, makes very good sense for our business, and I feel good about it, but it makes good sense for our business, and that's what's really going to drive the decision and the alignment.
Okay, thanks again. When we talk about developing a platform, this will certainly be impacted by where you are in that spectrum. So if you, at the start of the session today, we talked about you're new to sponsorship and you don't have a strategy, or you're a mature brand and you need to augment a current one. So that platform development in terms of building that out is going to be different for everyone. And it doesn't necessarily mean we have to do, as you use the phrase, matching luggage, where the look and feel has to be the same, but the sentiment that fan or that consumer has with your brand should be the same in order for you to maximize your overall portfolio investment. So there's three images there that are still surprisingly new in the sponsorship world. As Ian, I think, alluded to last week or the week prior, was music. If you want to connect with LDA or legal drinking age, a millennial young adult, certainly being in music is important, but that's done differently now than it was 15, 20 years ago. So it isn't to say that music is outdated. Maybe how you do music is going to be different. Pickleball, for example, has made a bigger and bigger splash every single year. It's fairly untapped still from a large sponsor and partner perspective. So what are brands doing there to get in it and talk to that audience, considering who that consumer target market is? And then gaming is no longer new. Esports, they have stadiums built for them. They have celebrities built for them. I believe they might be in the Olympics at some point. So this is not a new small platform. And so if you're a brand who hasn't been in the gaming space, it's going to be uncomfortable to have that conversation to say, we should now be in gaming. And there's likely some people who are going to disagree or get uncomfortable or twitch in their seat a little bit. But as Ian and I have said, the closer you are to your facts as far as who your audience is and what you need to achieve in terms of gaining new white space in that market may push you into an area you haven't done before. Again, understand the change isn't easy and you might get a different look in the room, but it's worth at least exploring new opportunities that your brand hasn't done before, because you're in that room to make a change. And this is the type of thing, whether it's music, gaming, pickleball, numerous other examples where, again, you could be driving change in your business, but doing it in a really smart way.
If you don't have a music strategy, you don't have a Gen Z strategy within sponsorship. Gen Z are consuming sports much differently than millennials or Gen X or any generation above them did. They're consuming music differently, and the connection they have to music is more profound. So our advice is, if you don't have a music strategy, get one if you're looking to address Gen Z.
Step 3 is the implementation piece. And again, for an impatient person like me, this is tricky because, as Ian said, getting alignment and maintaining alignment is very difficult. And in the world of sponsorship, being obviously one rooted in passion points, you often, if you get approval, you just want to go. You're like, great, we have everyone sign off. I can just run with this myself or within my team. That may not be the best way to go about it, because at the end of the day, while a person may have checked off the box saying, yes, we're agreeing to this path, implementing it, especially within a large organization, is very important to keep those stakeholders involved. So be prepared to be collaborative and leverage the strength and energy from the entire organization to help you achieve what you want to do. It would be our kickoff to this section. From an implementation perspective, it's the fun part where you get to select and evaluate your properties in terms of fit. Everyone loves talking about measurables and KPIs, but this is a great place to start when it talks about selection. And it does ensure you have a certain level of objectivity in the selection process, because some people might be music fans, football fans, hockey fans, sports fans, gaming fans, whatever it may be. But you're all there from a professional perspective, measured against a lot of the similar or many of the similar commercial targets. So leverage those KPIs as the foundation of the selection process to make sure as you go along the journey, you're not deviating away from obviously what's going to make your business successful from a result side of things. Second thing is activation design. Be that through Lumency or other partners you have. You may look at, okay, we have the right partner, we know what our KPIs are, how should we bring them to life? Many partners will help you do this directly, which is great. They're equipped to do so, but at the end of the day, you might have an agency partner who's also going to support that activation, at least design. Our reinforcement here, as we've said a number of times now, is keep it simple, especially when launching a new partnership. There's generally a 1 or 2 year warm-up in terms of getting fans to become familiar with you. We've seen some scores where if you're in the double digits from a brand awareness perspective after year 1, that is an absolute home run. And a lot of times people, especially if they're comparing it to a legacy partnership, say, well, we don't have 40% brand recognition. I guess it failed. Well, not necessarily the case. So we talked about crawl, walk, run, sprint. Look at that the same way from activation design and say in the first year, we are going to be rooted in awareness, as an example. And then from there, build your messaging on that, because what you don't want to do is have too many messages and then you lose the impact you could have had, especially in that first year. And the last thing I'll say on that point is many times you'll have excited partners within your organization want to execute as many categories of that partnership as possible. But as the brand owner, you simply don't have the funding to do so. So wherever you can, measure that sponsorship with, or measure that passion with, what can I activate to the fullest extent to do a great job, rather than trying to bring too many activation points to life. And the last one we talked about before, take those KDMs, key decision makers, through the thought process around why that's the right property, why it's the right fit, and why your activation plan is the right one to do, respective of budget, timing, and sponsorship, or I guess agreement parameters.
And Ryan, just to give some action centers of what a brand owner should expect from having sponsor awareness within the property for a new property. If you're not hitting 11-12% after year 1, you're probably not doing an effective enough job creating that sense of connection. Your efforts from an activation perspective in year 1 should really be focused on getting that fan base, that community around that partnership, to know you're there and to see that you're there, intending to make a commitment around how you make their fan experience better. By year 3, if you're not in the 30% range of sponsor aware, you're probably not doing an effective enough job at creating that connection to making that fan experience better, and making the fan look back towards your brand and be willing to reward you for being there, for one, but also recognizing that you're there and part of the community and showing up as a super fan. Because sponsorship tends to be an equity build and a longer term proposition, ensure you set expectations within your organization that we're not going to get to sponsor aware numbers in the 50% plus range right out of the gate. Our job is to create that sense of connection, that sense of awareness in that first year. And then we're talking obviously in an example of a annual year-long something, be it a music festival or a professional sports season.
Oh, good point. All right, so we've done the work, we found the property, we've aligned on our KPIs, we have internal agreement on this is the right place to go, everyone's excited. And then we have to sit at the table and negotiate the deal that makes sense for us from not only an operating perspective, but financial one as well. So when we look at supporting our partners, which we do from a negotiation perspective, we play a few different roles. We play the role you need us to play, but at the end of the day, we see it as both an art and a science as far as bringing this to life is understanding, at least from an art perspective, what is the other side's position, and the more you know and understand of that, the more informed you are going to be. So certainly the properties are trying to get their categories filled with up and coming or leading brands within their category to support their overall business objectives, but they might see you as someone who could bring additional value in a way their previous partner didn't before. So do a little bit of homework and research to understand what does that property or partners need for us supporting their business, and that will help inform, I guess, from a negotiation perspective where you can sit. The second thing is there's absolutely a science to this as far as things you want to bring to the mix. The first dot you'll see there, its first bullet point is bring your paper to the table. What that does mean is it sets the parameters around the deal in an area you and your legal team and your executive are comfortable with. What you don't want to do is be so far down the path in terms of principles of the deal, and then suddenly there's details within the formal agreement that send you down a different direction that you don't want to go down. So we highly encourage starting off this process on your paper, on your terms. We understand that the property might have a different perspective and want to start on theirs, but the earlier you introduce that, the better. The second thing is finding a ratio from a sponsorship fee and activation ratio to anchor to. And why we say that's important is negotiations ideally don't get there, but they can be contentious. And in the heat of battle, so to speak, when you're sitting across the table from someone, you don't want to deviate from your business objectives in order to say you didn't lose a part of the negotiation. So in order to maintain the aspect of winning throughout, find an activation, sponsor feed activation ratio that makes sense, because as you progress maybe 1, 2, or 3 steps down the line, you're never wavering from that. And what that does do is ensures you're protecting yourself from an investment and risk perspective. And the last one is alluded to just now is think 3 steps ahead. I don't know, Ian, you've been in this game a little while now. I don't know if you've ever sat at a negotiation table saying the first proposal we did, everyone loved, signed, great, and you went out for drinks and celebrated afterwards. It's often a few rounds, and it's often some time between the first discussion and the final pen to paper. So again, not only from a fee and activation ratio perspective, but think 3 steps ahead. If they do X, we will do Y. It allows you to stay calm and measured in the process, as well as keep your leadership team involved. Because if it's something they're excited about, they're going to want updates. And knowing that you have their voice in your room during that negotiation will certainly make them feel like the company's well represented, as well as their interests.
Brian, is that typically we expect 3 rounds of negotiation on a deal that might be in the 2 million euro, 2 million USD plus range. And be prepared not to get off the train too early. Don't leave value on the table. Expect that it'll go 3 rounds. My career record is 19 rounds, which was exceptional, but be comfortable with that, to use your term earlier, with that discomfort, that the negotiation can feel icky, particularly if you're a renewing partner that has a strong relationship. Your agency partner, consultancy partner like us can come in and be the heavy and the more direct body at the table, taking first round negotiations to keep your relationship clean. And then just adding to that notion of anchors is also rights fee, including base comp and variable comp, to value as an important anchor point across your portfolio. And again, happy to the playback for the discussion we had in a deeper level on that, if anyone in the audience is interested in getting that.
Thank you. So congratulations. We have this amazing new property within the portfolio. What do we do now? You've added one. You may mean you've taken one away, or you've simply added one and the portfolio is getting bigger. We have always seen sponsorship in the portfolio as an ongoing, living, breathing thing. And so you'll often find yourself on the spectrum. Very few times have we worked with a partner and said, this is absolutely the wrong place. So this isn't necessarily a moving or left to right. This is a point in time assessment of where are we now and where do we want to get to? So trust in the group at your organization who's put you in the right place to start with. I'd say it's a very low odds, a very low percentage that as a sponsorship, you're absolutely in the wrong place. A lot of times it's the wrong spend, or maybe it's the wrong assets, or maybe it's the right place, wrong spend and wrong assets. So there's the mix of things you want to manage and balance within that group in order to take advantage of the investment you've already had. As we have alluded to, sometimes this means renegotiating mid or early term of a sponsorship if you don't feel like you're getting the value back to the business that you initially signed up for. And ultimately, we would love everyone to be in the green. Ultimately, we love everyone to be in the right spend, in the right place with the right assets, but that's not always the case because maybe your competition is making noise in the marketplace that your partner's hearing about, or maybe the partner's needs have changed. Again, this is why constantly, or consistently, I should say, measuring and monitoring the impact of your sponsorship is important because things will change and evolve, especially in how the pace of change in today's business space. And we want to make sure you're constantly, if you find yourself in the yellow, finding ways to stay in the green in terms of balancing your assets, your spend, and your activation. So a summary, we've thrown a lot at you. Hopefully, again, some new terminology to add into what you're already doing from a day-to-day perspective. Ian, one more. Thank you. Again, first, seek to understand. This is a good quote. We know we pulled this off before, but make sure you know and clearly understand why are we doing what we're doing now. What is changing about the business? And if we need to augment or create a sponsorship strategy, what is it about that change and action is going to get us the results we want? Number two is create. Again, this might be the forming, storming, norming piece of the exercise where you sit down with members of your organization and figure out what are the right properties, partnerships, and agreements we need to put in place to succeed. And then the last one being implementation, where you're going to bring the rest of the organization along on the journey with you. And again, the closer this strategy is aligned to your commercial objectives, the it'll be much easier from an implementation side of things.
Thanks, Ryan. Just giving you a couple of housekeeping slides. Please load your questions into the Q&A box. Ryan's going to pop that open and do these final couple of slides just from a housekeeping perspective again. And we're right on the nose, Ryan, from a time perspective. So amazing on that. Following this session, within the next 24 hours, we'll share three things back with you. One will be a soft copy of this presentation. So if there are any notes you missed, you can hopefully get reminded by reviewing the deck again. Please also reach out if you'd like a copy of the recording. Second, we will send you what we call our essential sponsorship glossary, which hopefully will give you more language, better terms. Please share this internally so that the language you're using really helps connect the strategy to the communication internally and externally you need to mount around strategy. And then the last thing we'll share back is our industry report that we did in partnership with our strategic partner, the World Federation of Advertisers. Late last year. We're about to launch the next one coming into January for the next version of this, but this is the future of sponsorship and what brands are considering and some of the metrics that you can look to benchmark your business against. And then the offer would be, we love talking about sponsorship. Ryan and I love to talk generally, but please reach out with no cost, no obligation, no expectations. If you'd like 30% of our 30 minutes of our time, sorry, not 30%, of consulting time on us. If there's something you need to noodle on, something you'd like to bounce against the wall, happy to do that as a thank you for attending today. Here's the series in review. We had a session 2 weeks ago on sponsorship operations and governance. Please do reach out. I'm going to give you an email in a moment if you'd like to see that deck or see that playback. The next one was on data around sponsorship, which included measurement. And obviously today we talked about sponsorship strategy. So feel free to screen cap or take a picture of this slide with our emails on, and do reach out if you'd like to accept that offer for 30 minutes of our time, or if you would like to get any of those documents from earlier sessions. So I'm going to stop sharing just so you can see our lovely faces. And Ryan, how are we looking in the chat for questions, or in the question box rather?
We just had one posted here. It's a great question. It's the sponsorship seems to be increasingly crowded. What has that done to the spend ratio recommendation in terms of fees to activation?
Mhm. Yeah, I'll take the slide and jump in, Ryan. That's one of the questions we get asked most often. What is that right? What is the proper rights fee to activation ratio? The short answer is it depends. And while, as Ryan mentioned earlier, you should have an anchor point to say that we are going to align our organization in principle to an activation to rights fee ratio spend of X. Why do we do that? That enables us to have conversations at the total investment level to say, let's not buy things we don't have the budget or the resources to activate. Maybe let's sponsor less, activate more. And it doesn't mean each property in your portfolio gets that same commitment, because there might be properties in an urban market where you're under fair share from a market share perspective against your national average. So you need to overspend maybe an activation to really break through against the competitor. There might be properties where you have a longer term exit plan and you're looking to maybe reduce activation there. So short advice would be have a target by geography and have a target by property type. And then on an individual property by property basis, look at how you might need to meter those out and to make sure those work. But thanks for that question. Anything to add there, Brian?
No, I think we had some other questions posed that were very similar. So if I add on top of that one, it'll probably be redundant to this one. So we had 3 others. The first one was, if someone's taking over sponsorship responsibilities within an organization and isn't necessarily aligned or properly informed of the current strategy, what should they do? This is an interesting one, at least from my perspective, because oftentimes you're new to a role and the hope or your personal desire is, I'm going to make a big splash and make a change. But when that's attached to maybe a long-term agreement of of substantial financial nature, you may be reluctant to do so or nervous to do so because it's done at a previous level where maybe someone on the executive team or maybe there was a global initiative you were following and you don't necessarily want to push back against that. So similar to understanding your business overall, I really encourage people to ask a lot of questions and just say, what is it about our existing strategy or existing property that's going to help us and me specifically achieve our current goals? Because oftentimes it has the leadership playing back your business objectives, and they will eventually err that maybe this current property and sponsor isn't aligned. Rather than you poking holes, you're simply being inquisitive and asking a question that helps them uncover it. Because at the end of the day, there's a broad spectrum of things that people are responsible for. They might not be looking back at an agreement from a sponsorship side of things, thinking, oh, this no longer serves our needs. So really encourage the group to ask the question around, if we're all aligned to meeting a long or short-term business objective, what is it about this particular agreement, property or partner, that's going to help us do that? And you're asking that question knowing there's some gaps, and see if you're aligned on what those gaps are. And hopefully from there, that will instigate some change and give you the rope to maybe dig in a little bit.
And our bias is also that we are and hope we still are athletes. And we love and we're passionate about the connection that sponsorship allows a brand to connect with its audience. We're also data nerds and process geeks. And our bias is we like the notion of a portfolio review that at least across top 80%, top 70% of your spend, let's dig in, shine light in the corners, and do an audit of each of those properties from a business case perspective. And let's come up with a keep kill list, to be blunt about how we categorize that. And there are things that we may want to exit over time because Ryan, the chart you showed earlier, there might be properties that are just in the wrong place. We're in front of the wrong audience. It doesn't have strong target efficiency, but everything else generally fits in. We're in the right place. We've made the right choices as a brand and where we're positioning ourselves from a property perspective. But maybe we need to look at assets differently or spend differently.
Yep. How we do for time? You want to do one more?
Yeah, 3 minutes. Let's try one more. Sure.
Okay. So if a property or partner changes direction and their strategy no longer matches ours, what is the best course of action? So I think the sentiment of this is, if we've signed a 5-7 year agreement, whatever made longer term agreement, halfway through that agreement, it seems like the partner's deviating from what our needs are. What do we do? As Ian alluded to, like, as I read this, I think what Ian alluded to a few minutes ago was we have very, very good success, if that's proper grammar. We have good success on working with partners midstream to understand, how we can maintain a long-term partnership, because it's essentially more work for a property to lose a partner and have to fill it with a new one. And if they keep you happy as a sponsor and a partner, that's a net benefit to them. But I would say you have an opportunity to get in your regular cadence meetings try and do some asset trading and figuring out, we've noticed you've shifted from X to Y. What is their recommendation? And maybe their long-term agreement, maybe their long-term objectives actually do line up with yours, but it hasn't been communicated properly, or the first version of an execution or an activation seems different and foreign to you. So I guess the short answer is, don't be afraid to reopen that discussion on making sure you're happy as a brand partner and a sponsor, because their role is to keep you and to keep you happy. And we're not surprised that brands will often augment what they're doing, or at least open a discussion about asset trading to get you what you want in the long term.
And we love the idea of sitting down on at least an annualized basis with your big spend partners, your important partners, and having a discussion about where is their business going and where is our business going. So there's a shared understanding of what objectives did each party have, and how can we work together to help each party get to their objectives to make for a stronger partnership with better value across both sides. And if we understand where they're going, then we can understand what pivots we might need to make in terms of continuing to follow along with them or changing that assets. So we're a minute away from the top of the hour, so we're going to close things off. Ryan, thanks for the time today. Great presenting with you, as always. Thanks to everyone for joining across the globe, wherever you come in from. Please reach out if you have questions, feedback, provocations, insults, we'll take. But thanks for your time today, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks again.